Howdy ho, friends and foes, and welcome to Dad's on Life, your weekly episodic show about parenting from a male perspective. Host Jay Miles, and with me as always, my co-host Logan, Hamanike,
Good afternoon.
Vince Porteraro. Chad is
How's it going?
indisposed today. He is indisposed today. He is his father-in-law in town and is not going to be able to be with us today. As we've also taken the last couple of weeks off to get our heads examined, whatever else you want to say, we needed a break to kind of recharge. And we are back at it again this week. Today we're going to be talking about teacher influences on children. There have been a couple of events recently that have brought into the forefront some issues with race and politics. Mainly, there are other things that we will be discussing. We're going to start with first thing pretty much being things that have happened in recent, they were brought up recently. The law that has been in effect, it started in Illinois, has been in effect since 2013. We're trying to change the law. It has nothing to do with adopting it. The law's been on the books. But it's about essentially teachers culturally educating students in Illinois. And something happened also in New York this week with a chart coming out and essentially being white into completely negative light. There is nothing positive about anything that has come out. It's essentially, in a way, designed pretty much just to make white people feel bad for being white in multiple variations. I mean, the chart is 8 things, and if you read it, there's no positivity at all. Which it begs the question: where's the middle of the road in all of this? Because the majority of people most likely fall in the middle. They don't fall on one side or the other. We'll get the sides in a second. Who wants to? Doug, you're the one who originally brought up the what was going on in Illinois. You want to start us off?
Sure. Hey, so yeah, exactly what Jason was saying. I'm just a dad, and I'm, very curious. I like to know what my kids are learning, and I try to take active part in it. And what the school is teaching, when looking for new schools, we did ask them, what curriculum you use and stuff. And they were easy enough to tell us, and from there, I just mean, like Jason said, there's been just a series of, of articles going around of things that are being taught in the schools. And some of the pressure my kids feel being from a Catholic school with their friends that aren't in Catholic schools. And it came up last week, with sledding and all. And then it comes back to, like, with my son, it's like, well, how do I respond? Or he doesn't know how to respond, or he does know how to respond, but he's fearful of what his answer might happen to bring on. So I think I was like looking, and this came out to me was Pope Francis's fear was about educational manipulation of children has its roots in totalitarianism. Schools are becoming re-education camps, a dictatorial path of only one form of thought. And it might be, well, of course, coming from the Pope, of course, it's going to lead to a very black-white looking version of what he thinks. But
right.
You can see it more and more coming along. So I was going to say just that schools are more or less are full of like young sponges. You know, today's children, my kids, you know, might be the next marketer, maybe the president. I just don't want to be naive about, like I already said, what my kids are learning, you know, as they become young adults, and what they're learning. Aside from the basics, that these are all new thoughts and what kids should be. These are all new like ideas to us. So when we went to school, it was, you know, your math and stuff, and whatever else went into it, we didn't notice as to like decide society today and what is shaping our kids, you know, and how they, you know, can be manipulated and changing society, you know, with kids and their learning. I'm not sure if
Right.
that's good or bad, but it's something that, you know, should be discussed, and at least as parents, we should know. So I'm not sure, but there's lots of political groups, media, and ideals that have moved into our school systems. The more I looked into this, and it's not just like high schools or colleges; it's school at every level, and the kids are basically pawns in this game, you know. And there's just like so many new phrases and information that we need to be aware of and stuff like. And I'm sure that most of you've heard these before, like the 1619 Project, the Lincoln Project, identity politics that deal with race, guilt, privilege, gender. Uh, Other things creeping into schools is like becoming a part of the nuclear family, progressivism is, and you know, some of the stuff you could agree with, don't agree with, not very familiar with, but it's all very trending right now, and it's all the things that I just mentioned are hitting your kids at some point in school.
Right.
So that's pretty much it for the moment.
Vince, you got so obviously you got something to say. It looks like.
I'm still
Well,
trying to digesting it. I didn't really. One of the things I gave up was reading news, um, and trying my best to do that. But yeah, you know, Doug touched on there's a number of things, uh, you know, with the school and education, and especially like Doug said, it's from elementary all the way to university, where you know it's instead of being slanted one way, now it's getting slanted the other way. And you know, as far as some of the more recent articles you said, I guess from Illinois and New York and other places about whiteness and pretty much how it just writing people up to be demons if you're pretty much white. They're like, well, isn't that what, you know, hundreds of years ago they said about, you know, other races? So it's like, well, now we're instead of actually coming back to, you know, everybody created equal and under God and everything, now we're just saying, well, you know, the shoe's on the other foot, so suck it. And you know, really, you know, no, that's not how it should be. And if that's the way they're teaching it now, again, you're not really teaching the fullness of history, less alone raising kids to be community and to be you know, a family and everything. You're raising them to point fingers at other people. You know, so no, it's not good. As far as, you know, personal experiences with my son, you know, even going to Catholic school, you know, the curriculum was solid, but yeah, we definitely noticed though, you know, there's teachers that, you know, they inexperienced, I think would be the word, inexperienced, and they don't want to step on toes, so they'll just teach whatever is in the curriculum, and that's it. And what I mean by that's it, I'm not saying like they, you know, I want them to go above and beyond and everything, even though you know, I think that is part of what a teacher should do. But I mean, when I say that's it, is I mean, they don't let the kids have a discussion about it. You know, it's here it is, eat it, and don't spit it out, don't question it, don't ask it. You know, and I didn't see too much of that with my son when he was in elementary school, but I noticed it a lot from my niece and nephew going to the high school over in Nazareth, where, you know, they would have questions, especially if it was on hot topics, when, you know, talking about the Civil War, Revolutionary War, Founding Fathers, race, and all that. Is teacher would just close it down, like shut them down, you know. And it wasn't like, oh, all right, yeah, I'm glad you're asking that question, and maybe have a rebuttal or say, okay, well, we're going to be actually talking about that tomorrow. You know, it was just like, how dare you have any thought and, you know, questions about this or that, you know, and that's wrong too. All right, you know, going back to the lack of having honest, the goodness debates, you know, and arguments, you know, discussion.
Right.
Just the other week, my family and I, we went down to visit my sister-in-law in West Philly there. And on Saturday, we went to the Museum of the American Revolution and Carpenter's Hall. And I thought we were going to hit everything. I thought we were going to hit Independence Hall, Liberty Bell, Benjamin. You know, I thought it was just like 50 museums down there, all history. And we spent over 6 hours just at the Museum of the American Revolution. And I love history. I love war. So, yeah, I went in there thinking like, oh, the internet says you could do it in an hour, yada, yada. And I was like, this is going to be some little tiny thing. And like, my mind is still like, I need to go back. Like, you know, and we were blessed. This guy, Mike, was there. He's one of the caretakers of the museum.
Curators.
Curators. Thank you. And Mike was there, and he was just this world of knowledge. Now, here's this 6 foot tall, 300 something pound, you know, black guy. All right. I mean, a big teddy bear. Don't get me wrong. He's a big teddy bear, but man, his knowledge and his outlook. All right. And especially like now, being as the times we're in, you know, coming from the fact that here's this 6 foot tall black African-American black guy. And he's telling about how, like, yeah, when he grew up, you know, this founding father, that founding father, it was just said, all right, they were slaveholders. So he just kind of like cut it off. He's like, all right, that's bad. But his, you know, yearning for knowledge and for history and for understanding things later in his life brought him back to look at the whole picture and, you know, really looking at, you know, putting yourself in those time periods. And he's like, and he, you know, his perspective, his not opinions, but really the way he was able to bring on all these different facts that even the tour through the museum doesn't hold, you know, was amazing. And it's still, it's not like, you know, it comes to the point where it's like, all right, especially when we go at like founding fathers, all right, yeah, but a lot of them had slaves, a lot of them did bad things, but if you don't go in and have that discussion, and if you don't go in and go deeper and look at different things, then really, I think most of history, you could just say, yeah, it was all evil, just scrap it, you know, instead of actually looking at the good things, looking at the whole person, looking at the other things and taking it all together. I know it's a hell of a lot to swallow. I'm still trying to chew on it. All right. You know, and you know, you miss out on so much. And that would be more my fear with any of this stuff in education, where, you know, I think there's, and maybe it's a paranoia of mine, where they just want to scrap all of history and or nitpick what they want to tell you, but in a very negative, dark way, and just say, well, you know, let's just, you know, start over. And like, well, yeah, but they're starting over by just picking at the bad. Is you're going to lose so much. And then we're going to end up making the same mistakes, as I already said at the beginning of my monologue here, where, you know, instead of coming around and saying that, you know, everybody has the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Now they're trying to say, well, now she was on the other foot. Now we get to screw you over. Like, no. But anyway, I think I lost my main thought of somewhere down the line there. So hand it off to somebody else.
Well, I'm pretty sure it was before. In fact, I know it was before you got here because it was. I'm sure it was, if I can remember, back before Halloween when school first started. Probably, maybe not even, maybe even before that. I have to really go back and look. But we talked about the fact that history as a curriculum is starting to be wiped out in some schools in the country. That was, we did, we did touch on that. Like I said, I'm pretty sure it was, in fact, I know it was before you got here, but I can't remember how far back for the life of me when it was. As we've been at this for almost a year, and there's about 40 shows worth of material to have to go back and remember to not remember exactly when you talked about something wouldn't be unheard of at this point. But I mean, there's other things you talk about. I mean, going off topic, we went down to I've been to the Holocaust Museum down in DC, and you talk about, I figured something like that I figured we could have done it in about an hour and a half, and it took about 3 or 4. Granted, it was with a whole class, but still, it's these museums. You think, even small ones, you think, yeah, this is going to be a lot quicker, and no, it ends up not being, because you see 1 or 2 things. It's kind of like, oh wow, and you can spend a good chunk of time in one place or another in a museum. But now going back to what we're talking about here, there's also the like I said, the fact that history is being wiped out in general as a curriculum in some schools in the U.S. now, and in fact they're teaching it later and later. It becomes, it gets mildly touched on in elementary school, and the first time you really get history and social studies now, where it's a major part of your curriculum. It's usually 6th or 7th grade at this point in most places, where you'll get social studies in elementary school, but not to the extent where it's a curriculum in itself, or in the broad spectrum that it is until middle school. And even then, it's kind of, it goes so quick, and they cover there's so much to cover for a country that only has 250, 260, 270, 270 years of history. It's a lot to cover in the limited amount of time that they have to cover it in a classroom setting. Now you throw in the fact that you have all these issues that, while the issues have been there for a long time, like race and politics and religion, I'm personally a big believer of, there are 3 topics that really shouldn't be brought into schools until certain ages anyway, because I think it's not really appropriate to cover things in the ways that they're being covered in this day and age until a certain age. Now, you have, with the way it's covered, it starts to it's desensitizing kids to these issues younger, which isn't necessarily a good thing. Because you have these, especially when it comes to race, you have these mindsets. Like Doug said, they're little sponges at a certain age. You have these mindsets where it's wrong to question issues of race and politics. Now, the sad fact is, you have adults that don't have the mindsets to have these discussions. Now, you have, like we mentioned, I mentioned the chart and the article in the New York Times. That's what's going on in New York and DC. This chart there's no positivity to it at all. And essentially I feel like it's made to make white people feel like shit for being born white. I may be wrong and you may disagree with me, but I think that's largely what, I don't think it was done for that, but that is the light that this issue is being painted in. Now, let's get to the teachers for 1 second. And you have, let's just say, hypothetically, unfortunately, it's not hypothetically, you have an issue where subject of racism is broached by something that is said from one student to another. In that aspect, unfortunately, that is on the teacher to address the situation. Now, the problem in that is that, yes, things like this should be at home, usually. It should be introduced and discussed, brought into discussion, brought into light at home. Now, if you have a child who goes in and says some kind of racial slur to another child, the teacher is should deal with the situation. The problem is, you then have the parent of the child who may have said it coming to the teacher and saying something. Maybe it's because of something they said at home or a belief they may have at home. Then you're opening a whole new can of worms of when you have somebody who may have prejudices or in fact straight out be a racist at home. And that obviously rubs off on the student. Rubs off on your kids. That's common fact. It's going to happen, or it could happen. Then you have the teacher who has to now deal with this situation. So that brings it into a completely different light when you have to bring up these situations in the classroom.
I see your points, and yeah, it's a very good one, and I'm sure it has happened, or maybe happens more often than we even think. But one of the other things that I've come across personally as well is teachers bringing their own personal opinions into the classroom, which,
right,
to a certain extent, obviously, they have to have liberty to be able to teach these kids, use their own thoughts, or else they can't attract these kids or keep their attention spans, obviously, reading from a textbook. That's why we hire them.
Sure.
But some of their own political opinions sometimes come out. In the case of my friend that I was reading about his son, and how his son's grade was hindered by apparently not following the directions when they were talking about Biden and stuff. And this was in 5th grade.
Right.
And of course it fired up the parent. They call the school and they say, well, we don't stand behind this and it shouldn't have happened. And yeah, exactly, it shouldn't have happened. And a lot of these small incidents are going to happen over time and all. But also I know another person who went back to school to become a teacher. And it turns out that, with the class she was taking, there was a lot of of course, stuff that she needs to write and all. So they told her to write a paper on a woman who had increasing issues, social things that they had to come over, and made them a great person. So she chose an American Indian who changed to Catholic and was like going back and, talking about the praises of Catholic to other people within where she lived. And the teacher said that it didn't meet the level of challenge that she was looking for and gave her a grade on it. I mean, and this is, in college. And I'm sure that there's, things like this that people are going to have to overcome if they want to be a teacher and accept. But once again, it's like these things that are now people's opinions are what you have to, you have to know your teacher to make sure that you get a good grade, even though you submitted, proper documentation. But I mean, it's not just in the classroom, because kids are learning all the time. Everywhere they look, they're learning,
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to say the other thing that brings into this, which is heavy-handed, which also creeps into school because of, as you get into certain grades, they start talking about, literature and stuff, and they bring in the news into under the cloud of literature. My son has done this. We've all done topics, and if they're reading certain news of certain way that things are, then that's what they're getting fed, through the media, whether it's in school or outside of school. Media is a big driver of all of this. I say one of the biggest issues with what we're talking about today is media.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole not to get off topic, but just to explain why this story is important, is that my son was out sledding. They come across, start talking about men being allowed, I was standing there like being allowed to be part of women's sports, and
Right.
they're all carrying on, this is great and all. And then my son kind of is like, well, isn't there only like 2 genders, and was afraid to say anything like that because that's what he believes. That's what he's been taught to believe. But publicly, can you say that without, people haranguing you or, carrying on? So, I mean, it causes fear in kids, and there's no way we could shelter them from this either. But I just think that it has a growing agitation with certain kids that, what can I say? What can I not say? And then also leading them to possibly saying the wrong thing, even if that's your belief. So,
Well, there's been it's happened a couple of times. That's been a constant discussion for years, because there's a lot of different elements with the sports aspect of this. I, for one, have closely followed the story of a young man by the name of Mac Banks. Mac Banks. Mac was born a girl, decided to transition to being a boy, and was a wrestler. Wanted to wrestle the boys in Texas. Texas State High School, Scholastic Athletics, whatever exactly it is called, ruled that Mac and forced him to wrestle the girls after the transition. He won 2 state championships in girls wrestling, but that wasn't what he wanted. He wanted to wrestle the boys. Now you have obviously you have the other way. It goes the other way around too, especially when you had a boy who became a girl who in MMA, who we're talking adults now, who fought against other women, actually broke a woman's skull in a fight in a MMA fight. Her name is Fallon Fox. Yeah, you have major issues on both parts. And in some cases, in both cases, neither one of them is right. Mac should have been able to do it, and Fallon just, I honestly at this point, not even 100% sure that Fallon should have been an MMA fighter anyway. You have too many issues. And then you have like Mac's issue where probably for the sake of integrity and fairness, he probably should have been with hormone injections and testosterone and stuff like that, should have probably been put in with the boys because of those enhancements. When it comes, because of the transit, these are things that you're given for transition. So you have that. I mean, there's a ton of issues when it comes to sports, but we're also talking about a time when you're still facing a wide gap in payment for women's athletics compared to men's. So there's still obviously a lot of issues in sports that need to be addressed.
Going back to the teachers in schools, one of the things, again, my son is only in 4th grade, and but watching my niece and nephew closely over the years was the stripping away of literature. Let's see, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, To Kill a Mockingbird, Shakespeare, like Macbeth, Hamlet, a number of these books, even oh my gosh, they stuck the pig's head, Lord of the Flies.
Yes.
They were taken out, and
Slaughterhouse-Five. Yeah, that's it goes back to Slaughterhouse-Five and things like that. Yeah.
Well, yeah. They take them out and they label them this and label them that, and it was just like, again, like why? Was it too hard to actually have some open conversations about these things and to open up the intellect of the kids and everything, so that's something though that, seeing that, obviously I'm not going to send my son to that high school. Right. And again, where, that's not even like specifically the teacher, that's the school education system itself saying, we're getting rid of that, and then the teachers there having to dish it out, which leads me to the next part where, I think there's a lot of similarities in our education system much as our hospitals and health system, where, you know, they don't look at our kids as sponges that need to have their intellects strengthened and questions and learning. And it's just numbers. It's just numbers. Shove them through, shove them through, shove them through. I got 30 minutes. How fast can I teach this? You don't understand it. Tough shit. And next curriculum, you know, and, you know, where, you know, it's the same in the healthcare system. You know, you come in and, you know, if you have great insurance, good, we'll take care of you. We'll run 50 million tests. You don't have insurance, here's a Band-Aid, go drink some vodka, take 2 Tylenols. Like George Carlin, you know, would do the, you know, pop 2 pills, you'll see me in the morning, you know, like it's this, you know, totally Pink Floydish way of just line them up, throw them in the meat grinder, dish them out, like, you know. And it's really that's really what needs to change. I mean, you know, open up the discussion, keep the literature in, or add literature, for crying out loud. Like I'm not even seeing, in the case of the high school, it wasn't like, okay, we got rid of these 4 books and we're going to put it in these 4 books. Like it was just like, we got rid of the books. Okay. You know, like spelling, we don't care about spelling anymore. Get rid of it. You know, they don't even replace it, you know? So you know, that's something that I see looking ahead, you know, where it's like, wow, you know, if they're doing that, you know, in high schools and, you know, maybe even colleges and stuff like that, where, you know, for crying out loud, you know, people, let's at least find some type of a substitute that's still gonna, you know, bring about, you know, the intellect and the learning and stuff like that. But, you know, and let's get back to, you know, taking pride in, you know, you have our kids, all right, you know, you're there to teach them and to really spark their intellect and their reasoning and their thought process and stuff. You know, touching back on what you brought up, Jason, the you know, hypothetical, you know, one kid calls another kid something or other. All right. You know, and then, all right, now the teacher's got to get involved, and then that means the parents is like, well, you know, that doesn't even have to be a racial slur. You know, that's the way I think your hypothetical thing, but you know, that's bullying in general. And from everything I've experienced with bullying in schools, contrary to even the fact that this has been in the media for how long, it is so malarkey. It's not even funny. Where, you know, yeah, you might get a phone call, or the other parent might get a phone call, but then they either try sheltering the, you know, the crap out of the kid who got bullied or got, you know, slammed, which then just leads them to get more picked on, or they just say, oh, kids are kids, and
sweep it under the rug.
You know, sweep it under the rug. You know, and for really no good reason. There's a million reasons, don't get me wrong, but none of them are good. All right. None of them are good. All right. And, you know, and two, like, you know, with the history and stuff like that, is as parents, yeah, we need to be involved. We need to be reading. You know, if you're not homeschooling, you should be grabbing the textbooks as your kids come home and be like, all right, not just what are you learning? And then your kid looks at you like, I don't know, but I passed the test. You know, you should be reading the textbooks, saying, oh, okay. Oh, you're reading this book, or you're reading this, and then expand upon it, you know. Now, you know, yeah, there's going to be opinions, there's going to be this or that, you know, but get involved, ask your quiz the questions, so then they can at least ask you, or you can have them go back and then ask the teacher questions and then find out if that teacher is any good or not, you know. But, you know, don't just idly sit by and say, oh, you know, the school's got my kids, they're teaching it, and then when your kid, whatever happens, oh, it's the school's fault. Bullshit. Be a parent, get involved, you know.
Just to jump in here, it's the whiteness survey in West Bend was to promote people to discussion about privilege before they read To Kill a Mockingbird. And Brendan's actually reading To Kill a Mockingbird now in school. So so that one's still some places still use that one.
Well, I'm glad he's reading To Kill a Mockingbird. That's a good book. That's a real good book. But even still, why did he have to take a whiteness survey before reading the book?
Well, it's supposed to promote discussion, but clearly it was not the best way to do that.
Yeah. I'm going to have to read over this survey.
It was a privilege. It wasn't a whiteness one. It was a privilege survey. But nearly the same difference.
I don't know.
Where the hell did he go?
Who?
One who hasn't said a fucking word the whole time.
His coffee pot broke.
He put himself on mute too, so I don't know what the hell he's doing. Oh, there he is. He ain't said a word the whole show. Say something.
I haven't said a word the whole show because you guys have been carrying it really well, and I've been wondering just how much damage to the walls my sons would do if they listened to this conversation. Starting with the whole concept of the chart, because the chart may have been put out by a particular teacher, but the obvious implications in
it was put out. I don't think it was put out by a teacher. I thought the whole thing was the school the school in general. I think it was. The school in general. I think it was the board or the state itself. I'm not sure.
I'll have to go back and read the article because what I was getting at was that the obvious implication is that there's a finger pointed toward the BLM movement for putting these things forward. My sons would be quick to say that's bullshit and that it's fringe elements possibly connected to things like BLM or other movements that put this type of trash out there. But that to represent entire movements, especially ones that are doing as much good as BLM, as being responsible for it would be highly inappropriate. And they'd probably shoot me because I'm probably not defending it as much as they would want me to. Well, it's interesting. One of the things I love about our podcast is the different perspectives, not the different opinions. I'm talking about, Jason has very young kids. I have much older kids. The two of you have kids in the middle. So our experiences and what they experience are different. The whole concept of history being rewritten. I must be old because Ray Bradbury started talking about this in Fahrenheit 451. So, I mean, this is not a new topic by any means. It's getting a little bit more publicity now because we're, for instance, the white community is finally learning what Juneteenth is. But it's always been there. It's been there for many years. There's a whole white privilege thing that you have an enormous amount of this country that never paid attention to history before. A lot of it was taught in schools, but not that, because it wasn't part of white history, if you will. It's offensive to me to even put it that way, but it's reality. I can't tell you the number of times the boys would come home on a day, they come home from school on a day where something happened. A school shooting, a big fire, something at NASA where some accident happened, whatever. National news. And the first thing I'd say when they walk in the door is, did you talk about it at school? And 9 times out of 10, the answer would be no. Because you're right, the teachers are so wired to stick to the curriculum, teach to the test, and they didn't have a choice, that they didn't feel like they could even take 15 minutes out for an exchange about what was actually going on in the world. But this became more prevalent as my kids were in the 7th and 8th and high school. It was less of an issue when they were very young, like Jason's kids are now. But there were plenty of times, Charlottesville and Parkland and things like that, where I would ask my kids, did you talk about it at school? And the answer would be a definitive no. We knew about it. We talked about it in the halls, but the teachers wouldn't talk about it. To me, that's very frustrating. I don't necessarily blame the teachers. I blame the system for forcing them to teach to a particular curriculum and a particular, with the mind that they have to pass tests, they have to get certain scores, but are they really learning anything? So it's really been it's been definitive in helping shape how I push them to address their college careers. Go out there and get good grades. You don't want to fail out, but the key is, are you learning anything in your classes? We were talking about that in high school too. So yeah, I'd like to think that despite the other issues that were going on in my house, that we were good parents and that we were always talking about current events and what was going on. I mean, really deep, and the kids would have very, very strong opinions about it. There was this one guy in Jeremy, my younger son's social studies teacher at the latter part of high school, Chris Gregory, who not only taught them about the way the U.S. government works, but even took them on class trips down to Washington, D.C. My son's high school, I'm sure I've bragged about this before, is the first and I think only high school in this country's history to have actually written a bill that was passed by Congress. So they took a lot of pride in doing that. And Jeremy actually spent some time with a lot of his classmates in Washington, sitting in senators and representatives' offices and essentially lobbying for the passing of the bill. It was very, very, this guy was really good at stopping class, no matter what it took, and talking about the day's current events. It started with the 2016 presidential election. That's when Jeremy first got to know this guy. And it went all the way through high school after that. Jeremy's a freshman in college now. So, sorry, what was that, Doug?
Oh, it's plane passing.
Okay. Yes, we talked about planes in schools too. So there are definitely some teachers. Jeremy had Chris Gregory. I had a guy named Ed Bauer, who unfortunately passed away just a few months ago. Obviously, he was a much older man at this point. But people who would stop and they would talk about what's going on and challenge the kids to have these conversations. Two teachers in my history did that, Ed Bauer and Betty Coney, and that was it. And I worshiped these two. They were my favorite teachers of all time because we could talk about real stuff and not just talk about what was in the textbooks. Mm-hmm. And this went on. So, Jeremy has his teachers, people like Chris Gregory. And I know that Justin had his share of, a couple of teachers like that as well.
Right.
But I don't know if it's much more highlighted in today's world, but is it really different? Mm-hmm. Like I said, Ray Bradbury wrote about this many years ago in Fahrenheit 451. We've been talking about censorship and book burning and taking stuff out of curriculums and not teaching what really happened. By the way, if for anybody listening, and you guys should watch this, CNN has been running a series every Sunday night that they started 2 weeks ago now, I think. Oh no, this is the second Sunday, about Abraham Lincoln, called Divided We Stand. And I know it's CNN, so slanted viewpoints and all that sort of thing, but it's a real interesting history about Abe Lincoln, the guy who supposedly stood his whole life for the abolition of slavery. Not so much.
Nope.
But did we learn that in school? No, we didn't learn that in school.
I did.
And you're the only one. It's amazing.
4 years of homeschooling, baby.
Well, okay, so you learned it in the right school. There you go. But it's just wonderful to watch this stuff and really get that extra bit that it wasn't. He was definitely equally minded, and he didn't want to have slavery, and he always felt that way. And it's interesting to see what formed his opinions of that. But his whole concept of actually that all of the people who were black would be reunited and not necessarily be in the U.S. after slavery ended. I mean, mind-blowing. Nobody teaches that in public schools. Probably don't teach it in private schools. I'm ranting a bit here, but I agree with all the topics. The question is, how new are they?
Well, yeah, and Keith, that's what I was going to interject here. Was just none of it is really new. None of it is new. At any point in history, somebody was going to try either rewriting it, redoing it, or pushing it one way or the other. I'd like to think that we, at least here, grew up in a time where it was a little less heavy on the bias side, but there was definitely a black mark, like what is that, like veterans records when they get their documents from the government. It's pretty much all black marked except for like their name and maybe something else, but everything else is a black marker through it. And absolutely none of it is new. But I think what we're talking more about though is what they're doing beneficial for our kids, or is it actually really hindering our kids, and from hindering our kids, then it's going to end up hindering the society, not only that our kids will eventually be leaders in, but then their kids are going to be participators in. So new, no, it's not new. These are all still old topics, but is the way we're going about it like the best possible way, or are we trying to really either slant it to one degree or the other, or are we really just trying to kind of like what we talked about with bullying just a minute ago, push it under the rug and just get through it, so no, you're absolutely right. Books, like Fahrenheit 451 and others, and even poems and everything else like that, they've talked about this, and to be sure, things were done. I mean, at some point, I'm sure a book said that certain individuals were the demons, and thank God that got written out by the time we were born. All right. So, there's always change. All right. And we shouldn't be afraid of change, but we should look at change, whatever's put in front of us, and weigh it on that moral scale and or bonuses or positives, much as, the house you're sitting in. When you bought that house, you had to weigh its market value, its listed value. You had to look at if the furnace was fine or if somebody tore the copper pipes out of it, and you had to weigh and make a decision. If that was going to be the right decision, the good decision, a lasting decision. It's, we got to be able to do that with our educational system, starting at home, to be sure, but still with the teachers and the curriculum and anything else that comes around.
I have to make an editorial comment here or an edit to what I said, because if my sons ever watch this, I'm going to get my head ripped off. I named the wrong teacher. I named the teacher that was the guy who ran the robotics team, which is a whole other story we could talk about. But Stuart Wexler was the guy who was so big in the social studies and talking about current events and talking about school shootings and things like that. Interestingly enough, I think about teachers that have had an impact on my kids. Chris Gregory is the guy who runs the robotics team, and that's so big for me right now, because if you talk about the Mars lunar landing, totally off topic, but if you talk about the Mars lunar landing and the equipment that's crawling across Mars right now, it's robotics. Sure. So my son's bursting with pride with all of the stuff he did to run the strategy team on the rope for robotics. And he's really wired to continue that where he is at Ohio State right now. These are like huge things, but one of the things we started this whole conversation with is who are the teachers that influenced them and how they were influenced, and not necessarily, we weren't necessarily talking about things like whiteness charts and race and things like that, but yeah, there's an influence there too as well. But there's so few teachers. I mean, it's 2 or 3 people only in my history, 2 or 3 people only in Jeremy's history, 2 or 3 teachers only in Justin's history.
Probably in all of our histories, honestly.
Right. It's such a sad state of affairs that years later, I have this ridiculous memory for the names, but did they really have any impact on me? You know, my own teachers, I can remember them all the way back to first grade, all their names, but did they really have much of an impact? Not so much.
Right.
In different ways, you know, they were memorable one way or the other, but almost all taught to the test. And they all were, I guess now that I look back at it, fearful of deviating from the program. Even though at the time I thought the world of all of them, but not all of them, but many of them. I thought very highly of so many of my teachers, but they didn't really deviate at all. They just taught what was that curriculum. And I don't necessarily fault them for it, because so many people I know over the years in teaching have lost their jobs when they tried not to teach to the curriculum. So we all got to keep our jobs, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. But I am forever grateful for the set of teachers, and I'm grateful for the ones that didn't do well too, in a sort of a different way. Oh, I can't remember her name now, but there was a teacher for Justin on the for English, which was never his good subject, who did all sorts of stupid stuff in grading and not allowing certain scores and dismissing certain topics when he would write about things. And his mother and I had to actually go to the school and eventually to the school board to file formal complaints about the teacher, who wound up suspiciously not being a teacher in the school system the next year. But it was a great lesson for Justin, because we would equate it to, well, when you work for a boss, they can act in very irrational ways in the real world, in the business world, when you have a job. And this is no different. And we never tried to defend her to our son. She was blatantly wrong in some things she did. And it was a great life lesson for him in how to be treated badly by somebody who's in a position of power. He knew it was the wrong thing that was happening, but you could see he was drawing the lines to what would happen in his future and how to be careful with people you work for, because this could happen, you know, in a job. And to what to do to maintain your composure, to present coherent discussions and arguments to make sure that you try to better your situation as much as possible. And so I'm actually pretty grateful for some of the negative stuff that happened too, because it happens to all of us. Hell, I had a teacher in college who didn't give me an A on a paper she said was one of the best that she'd ever seen written, because it was on the subject of baseball that she didn't like, after telling us we could write anything we wanted to. Stuff happens. I'll never forgive her. Well, I wanted to chuck her out the window for sure. It's a great paper.
Aye.
Well, look at that. Vince is getting bold.
Both on mute
now.
They're both on mute. I was just about to say, as we push an hour here, I was just about to say, anybody else have anything they want to add? But we got 2 people on mute. Doug, you have anything you want to add before we wrap this up?
Just went a little bit different than I thought. And it was very interesting to discuss with you. And I'm just afraid of kids coming out with certain opinions that are informed by the media and schools, and and where they draw their opinions from, and creating like divisions on race, and just to keep our eye on what is going on, and hoping that kids have their own moral foundations, in with community, their neighborhood, their church, and have their own morals about them, and that doesn't change their opinion, and they don't have anxiety or fear to be who they are, because they are all individuals, as society tries to break us all into groups. And I understand how groups are important, and if you've done it to one, then you've done it to all of us type mentality. But we still need to be fair to share our own opinions. And the good thing is that we have hope. And the thing is that the really scary thing about today going around is seeing people that don't have hope, and the people around us, and just thinking back to Lent and all, and giving of alms and worried about people around us, and making sure that our kids are part of the community, part of the conversation, and they just keep all that in mind, that they are individuals. And that's about all. One other thing that I was going to say that we could also discuss at some other point is marijuana. After seeing the new insurance statistics coming out, that with marijuana now being legalized, how long-term marijuana users at the age of 12 on up has increased by like 37%. So we'll have to check out that one too. But that's about it for this week. Don't forget to check us out on YouTube.
Vince?
Doug wrapped it up pretty well. I'll leave it for him. That was good. So yeah, just to all dads out there, to all parents out there, is Goya. Get off your ass.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I've heard that one before. That's they use that in AA. Keith, you got anything else you want to add before?
I would simply add, going back to the rant that I was on before, that the idea that any of this is new is preposterous, and it's so systemic in our society that the people who are really upset and really angry and, oh, we've got to change this right now, I would love to. I would absolutely love to. But it's been something that has been part of our society since the day it started.
Right.
And I don't want it to sound dismissive by saying that it's nothing new, but it's hard to change something quickly that has been so firmly ingrained in how we have existed since the beginning of this country. And when I talk about the beginning, I'm talking about the 1600s, not in 1776. I'm talking about since the day settlers came off the ship, and before that with the Native Americans even. It is a long-term problem that's going to have long-term solutions that are going to well outlive us, because we're all old men in this group. Especially Jason, he's really old.
You should talk.
Takes one to know, you know what I mean? I am as fervently desiring of solutions in this area as quick as that possibly can be created. I think I'm more realistic than people who are perhaps more passionate about it, like my sons. My sons don't tolerate very well the idea that we can't solve this now. They're still learning, they're still developing. In some ways, they're still maturing. And God help me if they ever see this podcast, they're going to beat the crap out of me for saying that. But they're still forming opinions. And, it's interesting. They have a couple of cousins. So Jeremy is 18. Sam is just turned 20, the cousin. Justin's 21. And Josh is 23, another cousin. Those two are out west. And watching the way the four of them look at issues in different ways, and the gradually raising level of maturity by age, it's a really critical development time for formulating opinions and strategies on life. This era between 16 and I'd say 25, even more so perhaps than between, say, 4 and 10, when they're just not really paying attention a whole lot. No disrespect, or just, Jason, I love your girls. They're marvelous, but it's hard for them to gather the information. It's still a lot of noise for them. Every day there's changes in this age group, this 16 to 25 group. Just phenomenal to watch it. So the differences between the four boys, including the two cousins, it's just marvelous. So we have great lively banter by messenger that I inspire a lot, and it's really interesting. Even though they're all pretty much on the same camp, they're both very like most of their age, very left of center, if you will. Some more than others, though. They're definitely different in their levels of opinion and comprehension.
Mm-hmm.
So I could go on all day, but I will not rant anymore.
That is a pretty good place to leave us for this week. We are in a time of flux, for sure, in this country. The opportunity for change is for sure present in many aspects of the country as well as globally. The thing is who truly has power to make that change? Is it us? Is it government? Should they listen to us more? Should we listen to them more? There will be constant debate on all these issues. Hopefully, whatever changes are made in this country and on this planet are changes that get us going in the right direction. So from all of us here at Dad's on Life, take care, everybody.
Adios.
Have a good week.